we're gathered here today on National Sporting Heritage Day, which is a special day that across the world, but specifically in this country, we celebrate our national sporting heritage. There's events happening across the country, and this conversation will be broadcast eventually on our YouTube channel, so that people, fans of both Rodgers, because he has many across the globe, as well as golf, and Allan Robertson will be able to experience it. So thank you for coming out this evening. So we'll get started. Now, most of you have already told me you're pals with Rodger, and I've been pals with Rodger for a wee while as well. But for those in the audience that don't know you and are just here because they love Allan and love golf history, do you want to maybe just give us a wee bit of background on yourself and how you got started? He's told me many stories whilst having a glass of wine in hand about his life and career prior to getting involved with golf history. But just to give us a wee bit of background on yourself, what drew you to this subject? And as a golfer, you were obviously inspired at home, but what was it about sitting down and researching golf history that has sparked something in you?
So my relationship with golf goes back a long time, really. When I was about 11 years old, I was brought up in Northern Ireland. I plagued my parents, and eventually when I was 11 they got me my first set of sort of Lee Trevino irons. And played 54 holes a day, just obsessed by golf, And then and this is how peculiar I am. In my teenage years, when people had like Frankie Goes to Hollywood or something like that on the wall, I had Muir Ferguson and James Braid.
Wow, yeah. That's really geeky.
Yeah, you could tell I was a real hit with the girls, It just is the one thing that really truly resonated with me, and for all of the jobs or different hobbies I took up, golf was the one constant from the age of 11 that hasn't changed, So yeah, it's just an absolute, and I don't know where it comes from, but I just a passion, really.
I love that, Rodger, that you're the original, in some ways, golf geek, and that having that interest, and that you've been able to make it your career and make it something that you're so passionate about, and it's a wonderful thing. And StAndrews specifically has been such a focus for your work previously, and it is so magical, and so many of us here know why it's so magical. But what drew you to the town, and what continues to interest you about StAndrews as a subject?
StAndrews just it's a semi sort of spiritual place. It gets in your bones and haunts you, and you can't leave. It's the one destination where if I leave to go on holiday, I really just want to get back as quick as possible, But my passion on the history side of StAndrews, I just starts with David Joy. I went to see David Joy in 2010, doing a show where it was David Joy. It wasn't David Joy, it was Old Tom Morris. Peter Ellis meets Old Tom Morris. And I went to see Peter Ellis because Peter Ellis was everything to me. When I was 13, there's a photograph of Christmas morning, and behind me is the Skilextric and all those bits and pieces, but I was holding the video of A Round with Alice, and that was the one that got me really excited. So I was excited to see Peter Ellis. And then David Joy came on stage. And I thought, oh, what's this? How long am I going to have to put up with this? And he was mesmerizing. He was just unbelievable. I think David is one of the most influential historians, not just because of his books, but he's able to relate the stories of golf to us today. He is exceptional. And after the show, I wanted to read everything there was about Tom Morris. And I did, and the book had just come, it was 2008, The Colossus had come out, and that was fantastic. And then there was other books as well, like Kevin Cook's Tommy's Honour. But then I started finding out things of my own. And that's really where my love of research came from.
Yeah, sure. I mean, we mentioned Tom. Tom's looking over us tonight over here, so I have to be careful what we say about him. And the work that you've put in to celebrate his legacy and the work that Tom still inspires people today. But what was your impression of Allan before starting and taking on this project?
It wasn't good. It really wasn't. I had based my opinions, on a paragraph in the 1907 Tom Morris's book that was, which was a lovely book by Tulloch. But there was only, this is a paragraph about Allan Robertson, but it was kind of like, there was one word that haunted me, which was pawky. It's sort of, which to me...
Pawky comes in all the time, isn't it? What is pawky?
Pawky is cheeky, but it's not exactly flattering. It's gamesmanship. There was tales of like he would play with an old guy, and then would put a pin in front of the hole, and the old guy wouldn't realise why his ball wouldn't go into the hole because it kept hitting off the pin. So it wasn't, it wasn't an attractive subject at all. Really, I thought, he was an employer of Tom's, and that was it. That's what I thought, and I was so wrong.
And yet here we are, and so I know that you have co-authored the book with Bill Williams, who sadly passed away a few years ago. But do you want to talk about that process? I got to know Bill through social media. Sadly, was never able to meet him in person when he actually did come to StAndrews prior to his death. But he was a passionate supporter of yours, of other writers and researchers in the room today, but also he was so passionate about Allan and his contribution. But can you maybe talk about Bill and his work leading up to this and how you then got involved?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, he came to StAndrews and he had this idea of doing the book on Allan Robertson. And he came and he met with David Hamilton, the great historian, Peter Lewis, also phenomenal historian, and me. And we talked to him about the book and gave him some advice and some tips. And afterwards, I also stayed around for another coffee after with just myself and him, and I always got on really well with him. He could be, a little bit sharp, especially online and stuff. But to me, he was just this lovely guy. He sort of from Kent. Bit of a roughish diamond, not very diplomatic in his chat sometimes, but I still liked him. He had the heart of gold. And I said, just whatever you need, Allan Robertson's scrapbook is here in StAndrews. Just if you need me to do anything or take photographs, just let me know. And he got in touch, said he was coming in July, and then sent a note saying, I'm feeling a wee bit under the weather, I'll let you know when I'm coming. What he didn't say was the wee bit under the weather was pancreatic cancer, and it took him in 6 weeks. And I was really upset about this, and I wanted to reach out, and Stephen Proctor, who's written some marvellous books. He is just one of the best writers around today. Monarch of the Green's fantastic book about Tommy. And Stephen kindly put me in touch with Emma, Bill's daughter. And Emma came, she was staying at the Fairmont. She came to release some of the ashes in StAndrews. And I met her, and she had a little green sort of linen bag, and she said, "This is all my dad's notes. Could you take this on?" And I said yes straight away, because what else could I say, And then once I'd left and gone home, it was like, God, what have I done?
Yeah. Another thing to do.
Yeah. Well, no, absolutely. And my God, I am so grateful that I did, because I didn't know Allan Robertson at all. You know, I was so, the caricature that had been portrayed was so wrong, and I'm so glad that we have been able to write the real Allan Robertson and bring that character to life.
Yeah, and you know, we send tribute to him, to Bill's work that you've expanded on in such a brilliant way. You mentioned the Allan Robertson scrapbooks. Now, for many in the room, they wouldn't have known that these existed. They are pretty magical. I don't think I've only seen them once. Could you talk a bit more about the scrapbooks and what was your feelings when you saw them and touched them and opened them up and looked at them? This is the joy of our jobs in museum, is actually holding the objects.
It really was special, you know. It just, to think that he had been here, and you know, it's a scrapbook with clippings from his matches and lots about Tom's matches and various things that are happening in the town, you know. And there's little pencil notes in his own handwriting about things that have happened, and you know, it just was. It just brought him to life, really, you know. He really had a deep appreciation of being a Robertson, and this came across. He even had a coat of arms, you know, on the inside of the Robertson coat of arms, you know. So yeah, it's magical. That's the joy of living here in StAndrews, is that you can access, you know, fantastic archives here at the university, and also various, like the StAndrews Preservation Trust. You know, the first book that I did, The Footsteps of Old Tom Morris, that's largely thanks, the images are largely thanks to the StAndrews Preservation Trust. Their collection is out of this world, you know. So, you know, I owe a lot of thanks to the trust.
So, getting into a bit more detail about what's in the book, one, you know, you've set the stage so well, and you do so in all of your writings, but the one sentence that I loved, you know, this is a period of history that hasn't been explored quite as much. We have, you know, can envisage in some ways later golf and put ourselves in the shoes of people like Tom and later golfers, but to consider StAndrews, and there's a quote in here from Andrew Lang, that describes StAndrews as a filthy, starveling village with polluted waters. Was it really all that bad?
It was. You know, you've got to think, you know, the first fairway doesn't exist. None of that housing exists. You know, they're cleaning linen in the Swilcan burn, you know, which is why you're getting all these sort of waterborne diseases, like cholera, you know. So it really was, you know, even as late as 1850, you know, while I was looking at some of the clippings for Allan, there was one in the Citizen saying a lady had died of starvation. You know, and we kind of think that's 1700s, 1600s, but no, it was 1850. It was a tough old time, you know. They didn't have, North Street was a dirt track. It was still there, but it was a dirt track. You know, there was no paths, there was no street lighting, no clean water.
Which is why we have people like Sir Hugh Lyon Playfair coming in and wanting to make changes, but we'll get on to the Major in just a wee minute. But as I mentioned, you give like such a detailed background into the Robertsons, as well as just the landscape of the old course, of the links, I should say, just so vividly. And, you know, I'd always imagined Allan's home, which, thanks to you and others, now has its blue plaque on the side there, but it was known as Sandy Hill. But I'd always imagined, you know, a home, a kitchen that Allan would work in, and his father before him. But you brought to life what actually was going on there, in terms of other golfers using it as a golf parlour. Could you just maybe expand on that, and what did it look like going in? What do you imagine the goings on, and even just the path outside on the links road? I'm fascinated by that.
Yeah, no, it was a golf shop, you know. it was a workshop where they're making feathery balls. You know, I'm thinking about Davie's, because Davie was the one who built a house there. Davie is Allan's father. And he was a weaver originally, but weavers up to the 1820s were actually wealthy people. They could charge whatever price they liked. So the house that Allan's dad built, the first house on the links, was a respectable 2-story house. And downstairs was the golf parlour, which was the shop, really. So they're workshops, so they're making feathery balls. Davie, who is a businessman, has arranged a deal with McEwen's in Edinburgh, so he's selling clubs as well. And they're selling ginger beer, etc. So it is just a working golf shop. But in the golf shop, and the caddies would stand outside looking for a game. People would come in, and then Davie, and then Allan after him, Davie would set the odds for a match, you know. So, and his dad was a bit of a character, you know.
Yeah. We'll maybe come back to that in just a second.
Sure,
but
yeah.
the feathery golf balls have always been a fascination for me. I don't know if any of you have the same feeling, but I've always loved the feathery golf balls, particularly the ones made by Allan. When I started here, I had to pick my 5 favourite objects, and the featheries were among that. And I think you write in the book about the confidence that Allan had to stamp his one name, like Madonna, Allan, on his feathery golf balls. But I mean, the way that they were made, you know, the process that they were involved, for anybody that doesn't know, it was a laborious task, wasn't it? And you know, the thing that I love about them is that they're handmade, and you have that direct link to Davie, to Allan, and others, the Gourleys, that you can almost feel the spirit of them in their golf balls.
Yeah. Well, there were 3 pieces of leather stitched sort of inside out, so that the stitching was on the inside, and then made into a ball stuffed with wet goose feathers. There was like a brogue tool that squeezed them in, and then to a little narrow hole, and then that was sewn up and snipped. So it took a real skill, and Allan was praised in poetry at the time for being one of the best ball makers. But it was an absolute skill. But the Robertsons had been making feathery balls. I got it back to 1595, and it probably goes back further. You know, so.
And Allan would be aware of that history, you know, and again, that comes on to later issues, that weight of family history upon him.
Yeah, completely. I definitely get the feeling and the sense from the scrapbooks and stuff that he had a real sense of self, of who he was. And as you say, he just stamped a ball with Allan, you know. Who else did that? You think of all the other ball makers at the time, Tom Alexander, you know, just nobody, even Willie Park, nobody put their first name. He just put Allan. He was the Sevy of his day, you know, and he knew it.
Yeah,
you know.
yeah. I like that. But we have uncovered now this great star that has been forgotten is Davie, his father, and what a champion he was, and the achievements that he had, and being known literally as the champion golfer. And again, can you just sort of talk about him and what he managed to achieve at that time period?
Yeah, so Davie was the best golfer in Scotland. He beat Tom Alexander from Musselburgh in 1830. And he held the title for 5 years. So he was the best in the world, you know. And sadly, he died 1 year after Tom Alexander beat him in 1835. But the lovely thing, and I think there's almost a movie in that dynamic, is that the person who Allan beats to become the champion golfer is Tom Alexander. And then Allan holds the title for 19 years. So you're thinking father and son over that 29-year period. For 24 years, the Robertsons were the champion golfers, which is unbelievable. So we did a plaque for Allan just on his house there at the corner of the very corner house on the links. But I feel like Allan, his father, deserves, because outside of, you know, our sort of circle of people who love golf heritage, he will be forgotten, you know. And the only reference to his dad is in poetry at the time, and it's not exactly flattering either.
No, I was going to maybe bring up the fact that he was, I wouldn't say a scoundrel,
No.
not a scoundrel, but he perhaps had his favourites, as do I, but we all have our favourites. But when he was giving out the odds, which is about the handicapping and things, did he give preferential treatment to
He definitely
some?
Maybe
those in power.
He definitely gave preferential treatment to himself.
I see.
So
He was still the champion, though.
Yeah, but was still the champion golfer, but a businessman. You know, that was the one thing, the overriding thing. Harry asked me earlier what was the overriding thing. It was that's come out of the book, and for me it was that they're businessmen. They're not just caddies. You know, caddies stand outside their business. You know, they're employers and they're businessmen.
Yeah, I think it's good to have that put across, just how professional that it was. It wasn't just, oh, here's a feather ball and off you go. It truly he truly was the first. They were the first professionals.
Yeah, and it sort of set them. You know, you've got to think of golf shops. You know, and, you know, Must Do is a great master, but it's kind of like golf shops, clubs, balls, and some food, you know, and drinks. And that hasn't changed in 200 years.
No. So, I mean, Allan was growing up surrounded by these influential people, but his father was the top, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're going to do a couple of readings tonight from Rodger's book. I'm going to do the first one because I was really sort of loved this. It was really quite moving. But I'm just going to put my notes down to get to it. And this is harder than you think to balance everything. So it's a description of the links of StAndrews that appears on page 105 if you've got your copy already. It's from Chalmers' journal on the 8th of October 1842. And yeah, it's a visitor who has visited the Union Club, and it's a wee description of that. It's about 2 o'clock on a fine August day when, after the forenoon of useful avocations, I pop into the clubhouse to glance at the papers and be in the way of any agreeable temptation that may arise. All is emptiness and silence within and without, for there are no visiting members, and many of the residing ones are gone, some to grouse shooting, some to watering places, I'm sure, some here and some there. Most of the caddies, as servants who carry the clubs are called, have gone to work at the harvest, in pure despair of so much as one job per day, leaving only one or two to attend to the business of the green, who are seen to be, sorry, I should have put my glasses on, who are seen to be leaning listlessly against the corners of the distant houses as if they thought employment a thing to be wished for than expected. John Ness, porter to the clubhouse and who is also a caddy, is heard through the open window remarking to a passing acquaintance that things are most uncommonly dull just now. Apologies for my poor reading. A reminder to myself, glasses. But yeah, that scene of emptiness in an August day, for us who live through the busyness of the summer months here in StAndrews, it's hard to imagine the clubhouse. It's hard to imagine any form of dwelling being like that. But for golfers, but what a description! It's so evocative.
Yeah, and that was, I really loved getting into what is he looking at and what's he seeing, and that description I loved because it brought it to life, you know. So in the autumn meetings, there are 30, 40 people or so. You know, it's not, you know, now we have, you know, we've got 2,000 members or so, you know, we have 3 weeks of the autumn meeting, you know, so, but back then, so if you think that when it's busy, there's 30 people for the autumn meeting, throughout the year, it's not going to be busy, which also explains why there was no double pin needed on the greens. You know, because there was no need, because you just went out and you just came back, and there wasn't. It's only when the game becomes more popular, then they have to put in double pins, and then they have to expand the greens during Tom Morris's era. You know, but it was a more sedate time, and people were standing hoping either to carry some clubs because there's no bag, or work, you know, on the harvest. You know.
Yeah, and for Allan as a young boy, was there any barriers for him? Any barriers for entry into the sport, or was it just he was right there? Golf was his home in so many ways.
Yeah, no, it was everything, and that's the joy of StAndrews, and the joy of golf in Scotland. Anybody could play. You know, anybody who could pull a stick down from a tree and find a cork could whack it up and down North Street and play street golf. You know, or they could find a ball out on the links. They would get an old broken club that had been discarded. You know, it wasn't an elite sport. In Scotland, it was always free, and I loved that. You know, there might have been people skipping school because they might get to carry a bag because they needed to help feed the family. You know, but it wasn't. It was that's the joy of StAndrews. That golf is free and free for all.
Do you think Davie let Allan have the good balls, or second-hand ones?
But you know what? He's growing up and he's watching his father make feathery. So as a little boy, he would have had a go. You know, trying to darn a needle and make feathery balls. Which, come the time when he takes over the business, when he's 20, 21, he's fantastic at making feathery balls. You know.
Yeah, but the skill is so evident in the final produce.
Yeah.
So we mentioned some of the dominant personalities of this time period already. I mentioned the Major. Sandy Purry is another, Tom Morris, obviously we will get on to, but Hugh Lyon Playfair is somebody that you focus so much on in the book. There's a great chapter focused on Playfair, and he's someone that has been so influential and so active in the town, and just seeing it all laid out in one chapter, I was astounded. I knew most of what he had achieved, but you spoke of StAndrews at the start as being this quite a decaying place, and Playfair was there ready to make a change and was chomping at the bit to get started, it seems, by the 1840s. And can we just speak a wee bit about that, about all the things that, and maybe the relationship to the Robertsons as well, and what that was?
I think Sir Hugh Lyon Playfair was the saviour of StAndrews, you know, and that may sound overblown, but he really completely resurrected the town. The town had fallen to ruin since the times of John Knox. And Playfair, he'd been in India, sort of East India Company, and he had set out telegraph poles. So he was a guy who got things done. And he came back to StAndrews and basically said this could be the metropolis of golf. And they must have thought he was insane, you know, but he came back from India a very wealthy man, and basically, if people weren't willing to do things, he did it himself, you know, because he could afford to just pay for it. One example was the paving on South Street. Now, if you walk along South Street, you're going, well, why is this paving so large, you know? It's because Playfair had a disagreement with the people who owned the houses there. And he said, I want to put a path in. They said, no, we don't want people looking through our windows. So he put a path 15 foot away. And it was this lovely path all the way up South Street. And then the people really realised and had to walk through mud to get to their door. So that's why today the South Street's path is about 15 foot wide. So they agreed eventually, and that filled it in. You know, but that's what he did. You know, he famously, like he was a wrecking ball. You know, he sometimes did. You know, he sort of unionised or anglicised the street names. The principal's nose was actually the principal's porch on South Street. And a poem at the time said, even the principal's nose he means to cut off. And that was the porch on South Street. And he did, so that's why there's a nice front there, where the university is, by the gardens. And so he was an amazing man, and he did so much, and that's why I really wanted to put down everything that he did, to capture what he did. And it wasn't just the town, though, the links as well. He was the one, because, we're playing the links, and so their first hole is roughly where the 18th green is, down to the 17th green. And you've got to think of that hole in itself. So it's a really tough hole. The coastline, so there's no first fairway, that's sand and water. So they have to go, and then there's a massive bunker called Halkett's there as well. So the drive down there, missing the water, missing the bunker, missing the burn, and then the road hole bunker would have been on the right-hand side of the green. And the green is really lovely from that angle. It's a gently rising green. And it's how it was supposed to be played. So Playerford did it a lot. But the one thing to say there is that we were worried, the town was worried we were going to lose that fairway, the opening and closing hole. So Playerford started the land reclamation work. He came provost in 1842. So they started taking all the rubbish from all the building work that's going on and dumped it on the beach and levelled it off, which is why, and that eventually became the first hole. But that's why it's like a billiard table, because it's all reclaimed land, So Playfair was amazing, he truly was. And if he, I don't want to open another statue conversation because that took a lot of time for the Tom Morris one, but something for Playfair, I know one street is named after him, but just an amazing man. St Andrews, we in StAndrews owe so much to Playfair.
Indeed, and fingers in so many pies, as you say, and so many interests. So I think we've spoken about these influential people around Allan, but what about him as a man as he grows older? What was his family life like? He had his father, his mother, his brother, but his own family. He got married twice, but had no children. But I believe you've got a reading you'd like to do.
I've got a bit here to read out, but just the one thing that really came across in the research was that, and I kept hearing it in my head, was like, everyone goes. His dad went, his mum went and stuff. Let me read this short section. And the subtitle here is The Darkest Hour. I can't say the word hour, I'm Northern Irish. Amidst the highs of beating Willie Dunn was his main rival, and thereby cementing his hold on the title as champion golfer, Allan suffered terribly when his wife Helen died on 2nd of September 1848. This must have been a real blow to Allan. She was only 28. We do not know if it was during child labour or underlying health conditions, but for a relatively young Allan, it can only have been a true hardship. On the 11th of December 1843, Allan starts his scrapbook of Chambers journals. Inside is a poem called Death, and is heavily penciled. For Allan and Dunny, a rematch was lined up according to press reports for October. This time it would be over a gentle 36 holes. Their first match was over 360 holes, 10 rounds of 36. If Dunny thought, that was his nickname, Willie Dunn's name, if Dunny thought that he was getting to know StAndrews links and might get the edge on Allan, he was mistaken. Dunny lost 8-7.
After Helen's demise, the house would be filled with only Allan's mother and brother. That too will be all too fleeting, as on 15th of March 1844, Allan's mother Anne died aged 56. Suddenly, it was just the two boys, Allan and his younger brother David. Allan's world was dramatically changing, not only just Playfair's work redeveloping the town's landscape, but also the loss of his loved ones. In December 1843, the populace was introduced to the characters of Scrooge and Tiny Tim and the joys of Christmas time festivities with family and friends. If Allan had read it, he would have seen parallels of his own life and Scrooge's, who felt alone in the world when loved ones passed. Playfair became town provost in 1842 and gave the inhabitants an injection of belief in their future, but for Allan it must have been a bittersweet time. Even young David, who was noted in the 1841 census as a clothing merchant, aged 16, would soon be leaving for Australia and be one of the pioneers of golf there. Amidst all of this, the gambling gentlemen were likely to have been pushing for another match with the game's finest, Allan and Dunny. I doubt either player had much of an appetite to repeat the 360-hole marathon. The spectacle for the third match would come together in 1844, but this time it would consist of 3 matches of 36 holes on 3 different courses, namely StAndrews, the neutral links of North Berwick, and then Dunn's home links of Musselburgh. With his wife and mother gone, and Allan at a low ebb, Dunny must have thought his chances of beating the king were considerable. If there was an advantageous time to go up against Allan, surely this was it.
Oh dear.
So
greeting.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, but I just got this, everyone was leaving, and even his closest friend we'll get to left as well. But Allan didn't. Allan stayed, because I kind of think because James Ogilvy Fairley was also a backer of Allan. So I do wonder, did he offer Allan the chance at Prestwick before he offered it to Tom Morris? But it must have been very hard for him, truly.
I can see that. We've mentioned a wee bit about Tom already, and you and Chick have produced some incredible work on the life of Tom Morris, and the statue outside as well with the committee. We've celebrated Tom's legacy so much. I think we'd both jump at the chance to meet Tom Morris and speak to him, similarly Allan Robertson, to get that sense. And I think you get that character from your writing, you feel them with you, and that's when I start to get really geeky. But obviously, one of the most famous aspects of their relationship, Tom started working as a teenager with Allan and as an apprentice, and the two had a close relationship. But the most famous aspect that a lot of people are aware of is the falling out, and what impact that had. And we all have probably could put ourselves in the position of both men. But can we maybe just talk about what happened? What was the truth in your eyes of what you? Sorry, Tom. What is the truth that you see in their argument and falling out?
Yeah, I think the backdrop to this, to Tom playing with the gutty ball. So, as I said before, 1595, it goes back, so there's a long family heritage. Also, Allan's livelihood and the livelihood of his family and the livelihood of the people that he had employed in the shop relied on the feathery ball. So when the gutty ball came in, and it seemed to be, there's this new ball and it's much cheaper and it goes the same distance and you can play it in all weathers, and if you get a nick in it, you can go home and put it in hot water and reshape it, and his whole life must have been flash in front of his eyes, his whole livelihood and the livelihood of people he employed. So when Tom Morris was out playing with a feathery, but he ran out of golf balls, and the person he was playing with said that he had one of these new
gutty balls, and Tom played in with it, and by all accounts played well with it. But when they were coming in, they're at the 18th green, and Allan comes out to greet them, and is told, "Oh, wow, Tom's playing a great game with the gutty ball." Yeah, because Tom knew, and I have to say, in defence of Tom, he was playing with, I think it was John Campbell of Glensaddle, and what could he do? He'd run out of golf balls, and he wouldn't refuse one of these gentlemen who were kindly offering him. So Tom was between a rock and a hard place, in his defence. But when he went into the shop, he and Allan had words, and they went their own ways. But I have to say, Tom and Allan, for me, were like two close friends. In all the interviews of Tom in later life, especially the one with Everard, he does with HSC Everard, he says, "Tom, Allan, my friend Allan," constantly. And I think they were as close as can be, and not only from playing together, but growing up together. They're only 5 years apart. You often see them portrayed as Allan the old man and Tom the apprentice. Tom was 18 when he started, and by that age he knew how to make a feathery golf ball. He's already probably one of the best golfers in StAndrews, and and Tom's father is Allan's first cousin,
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I mean, we've sort of glossed over their playing and in challenge matches. You mentioned that incredible match, and the book goes into so much details about those exhaustive challenge matches that were happening across the country to allow Allan to then, as you say, take the title as champion golfer. What an experience it must have been! Not just the playing of golf, but the travel, the going back and forth to Musselburgh, the great rivalry that we have, and that you kind of put out into the book about just that impact and the interest that was there already for these competitions, for competitive golf.
Absolutely.
It's not a game that I would these matches, I don't know how they managed.
Yeah, well, the great thing was, and when we were doing the research, we really wanted the voices from people who were there at the time, not something written, like the Tulloch book on Tom Morris was written almost 50 years after Allan had died, So it was really important to get voices from that time, from Allan's time. And there's a wonderful book by H.T. Peter, and he came to Madras in 1837, so he was an absolute fan of Allan Robertson, and he said, and his book is just wonderful, and he tells these great stories about waking up and it's raining, in the middle of the night raining, and they think, oh, they're not going to get to go to see the great match, and then suddenly at 7 a.m, one of them says, oh, I can see a bit of sun. And they're so excited that they're going to this match, And he really brings to life, he said kids would run behind bushes and swing and say, I'm Allan Robertson. They go, no, I'm Allan Robertson. And they'd try to, the way that we did with Sevi and trying to impersonate their swings and stuff. He was such, he had fandom, really, and H.T. Peter, importantly, he brought that to life. He truly did, It's just a marvellous book if you can get a hold of it. There's a new version of it with Mr. Hamilton has done. So Grant Books, honestly, it brings that whole era to life and what it was like to see these feathery ball players.
And just how rowdy do you think these matches were? Were they at the level of what we've seen and witnessed at the Ryder Cup this weekend? Or
That's what I was thinking. I was thinking when I heard it, I watched a half an hour of it at the very beginning, and I had a soaring headache, and I couldn't watch it just because of the boos and the screams. And it was so unfortunate. I think Musselburgh was similar. Because in Musselburgh, there are no ropes, so they were kicking balls into rough. And that's why, famously in the Tom Morris versus Willie Park, Tom Morris walked off Mrs. Foreman's and went into the pub and refused to come out because the crowds were uncontrollable, So it wasn't that bad. But also the great thing of matches in those days was that you could go right up to the player. So the player's looking down at the ball, but he can see your brogues in the eye line, you know.
Mm.
And I love the excitement of that. But nothing like the bear pit that went on over the last weekend,
No.
which was unfortunate.
No, I think, yeah, I would agree with you. Couldn't watch it. And I think you alluded to this a wee bit about why didn't Allan get invited, but obviously to Prestwick, I mean, and sadly he would never live to obviously see the first Open Championship, and indeed his death really inspires them to want to know who was the predecessor, the next great champion. But do you see a world that he lives and that he takes home the first challenge belt?
Do you know, whenever, because there were challenges to his champion golfer, but whenever there were challenges, he let his golf do the talking, you know. He played a match with Tom Morris and Willie Dunn at Innerleven and beat one by 8 and the other one by 12. You know, when the Lindsay Medal in Crail, he won that. So he kind of let his golf do the talking. But also you got to think of it like, well, the way I like to think of it is like boxers. You know, if I take up boxing and I send Mike Tyson an email saying, "Can I box you?" It's just, you know.
I would like to see that.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't like to see that. But you know what I mean? You have to earn your stripes. And if there's no challenger, no outright challenger, because Tom couldn't beat Park before Park beat Morris. You know, I was always bouncing back and forth. There was one year, 1862, when Tom Morris beat Willie Park in every match. And that's the year when there should have been a match between Tom and Allan. But Allan was dead 3 years, you know. But
do you think there's, I was reading slightly near to the end of Allan's death, and was the newspapers, was the community trying to have that match happen and almost pit them against each other as?
No, well, surprisingly, the first challenge to Allan was Tom Morris, but it wasn't Tom, it was his backers, you know. And I think Lord Eglinton was involved, because if you see the language in the papers, it's very much like a knight's challenge, and he famously did the Eglinton tournament. So it's very much in that language, and it's a wee bit tongue-in-cheek, but and it does, you know, it's a bit of back and forth, you know, but it was never taken seriously, and there was never any serious money put down. There's conditions you have to fill to call it a grand match, and that would, you know, proper money, proper backers, date arranged, all that sort of stuff, you know. But that never came.
Okay. I just want to take a moment to talk about how the book looks. The great designer is in the room, Chick
fantastic.
Harper. We have a lot to thank him for, and the work that Chick has done on so many of the books that have been produced in the last, how many years, Chick? Quite a few. Golf books.
Since the first one was a neutral book in
2002, so that's quite a legacy that you've left in the work that you've laying out the book, and it's a beautiful, as we've come to expect from this collaboration.
Absolutely.
You have utilised the scrapbook with little details in the pages, and everything is eye-catching. So if you think I can't read a full chapter today, I'm just going to look at the pictures. It's amazing, and as we've said, the Preservation Trust, the university collections, some of our own imagery, in the club as well has gone into it. But Allan was captured. You know, he's just at that early beginning of Scottish photography, and thanks to the university, thanks to people like Playfair and Sir David Brewster, we have these wonderful images, photographs, actual glass plate negative photographs that are within the museum's collection, that capture this time period in the 1850s, and you get a real sense of their characters through the screen. But prior to that as well, the artwork that Allan is pictured in, you know, he's right there at the centre in the golfer's painting. I'm just going to change the screen. Oh, why is it looking like that? Sorry, everyone. But Allan is right here, isn't he? In the centre, and we have that depiction of him in one of probably the greatest golf artworks ever by Charles Lees from Cooper. It's wonderful, isn't it, to have these depictions?
Absolutely, absolutely. Can I just give a word of thanks to Chick as well? Like, Chick is wonderful, and for all the talks I've done, and from 2015, I really always leave going, I haven't spoken enough about Chick. He is phenomenal, you know, and he is artistic with footsteps, StAndrews in the footsteps of old Tom Morris. I wanted it to be, the images to be big, you know, and but Chick just blew my mind. You know, the stuff he does, it's artistic, you know. And it's not just books that he does. It was like we just had the town mass, the 100th, and he did the medal for that. The plaques, Chick did that. The walk of life, you know, walk up was what we call the walk as you go up to the Tom Moore statue. That's Chick, you know. So he is unbelievably brilliant. I'm truly, honestly grateful because, you know, he does wonderful things with images. He truly does. You know, takes a little bit of something, image we all know, and then suddenly magnifies something. It just looks outstanding. So yes, sorry. And this is wonderful. This is truly wonderful. Charles Lees.
Yeah, I don't know why it's slightly skewed. I think it's the projector, but
and that's Hugh Lyon Playfair, isn't it? Putting.
He's right in the centre, with Sandy Puri and others depicted.
Absolutely, and John Campbell of Glensaddle is in there as well. He was a big betting man, and frequently betted on the wrong person, so he lost fortunes. He always bet against Allan, and he never learned. You know, there was one time there was a match and they were playing the 17th, and I'm trying to get the order of this right. So Park and his partner are on the green, and 3, Allan's trying to play onto the green, and played the 3rd shot, and basically they duff it twice, and then their 5th shot, Campbell shouts out £5 to 1. You know, £15 to 1. So, and this really annoyed Allan. So Allan went in, and Allan chipped it into the hole. And Park and Hasty, he was the local MP, 3-putted. So Allan won the hole, and also the next tee shot, Willie Park tried to thrashed it straight into the burn. So Allan won the match. You know, so and Campbell, lost a lot of money.
Poor lad. This photograph, again, it's in the collection of the National Galleries, is thought to be the earliest known photograph of golf at StAndrews by David Octavius Hill and Robert Adamson. And again, Allan features in it. Where's my thing? There, just there. And it's thought to have inspired the golfers, potentially even been commissioned as an inspiration for Charles Lees, as David Octavius Hill and Charles Lees would have known each other, as both being members of the Academy in Edinburgh. I love his trousers on the end there, the check trousers. And just, if those of you who haven't seen them, these are the glass plate negative images that I spoke about from the 1850s that we have in our collection. And Allan, again, at the centre, he's the star of the show, self-assured Allan. Blurred depiction of his face here because he's in motion. But I absolutely love these photographs of the caddies as well as the men competing.
So this was staged, and it was called The Greatest Match Never Played. Thomas Rodger took 3 of these. There's 3 different ones.
Yeah, there's this one as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So the guy putting is Willie Dunn. Willie Park is there. Absolutely, yeah. And then Tom Morris next to him, and then Allan looking over a putt. But they're absolutely glorious. And then behind Allan is Bob Kirk, and then Daw Anderson is the one in between. So, and then Waddy Alexander at the other side. Yeah. But they're gorgeous pictures. But I always look what's happening behind them, you know. So you can see how close the beach is.
Yeah.
right behind them.
Yeah.
So this is 1845. No, this is, sorry, 1855, or 57. And so this is probably after 15 years of land reclamation. But you can still see how close the coast is, you know, where they're putting, and that's right at the edge. You know, so I think they're, yeah, it's amazing how close the coast came.
The water would be lapping at your feet.
Oh, absolutely. And then storms would throw up sandweed and seaweed and sand. You know, and this area was all called the saltgrass. You know, back in historic times, the whole area, I imagine sometime it was all underwater.
Just recently, there's been a wee bit of debate amongst the historians about just how tall Allan Robertson was. You write in the book that he was 5'5", which is my height. Do we believe that, do you think?
We might have to do a bit of an edit. So we're working on a little fun project with Mike Morrison, and he's the instigator. And we think that by, because one of the photographs we have of Allan, the club has the actual club. So we think if we can measure the club, then we can mathematically figure out exactly what height he was.
This is the fun excitement that happens in the golf geek community.
But so we'll see, but I think we're heading towards 5'2", you know, 5'1".
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, wee soul. But mighty.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
So I don't wish to come to an end, but there is a natural end, and sadly it's Allan's death. But before we get to that, he had one of his greatest rounds, and you talk about that in the book, scoring a record under 80, the first time it happened, just a year before he died, scoring a 79. What impact at the time did it have, and what impact on Allan himself? Did he have time, do you think, to reflect on his career and his life and what he'd achieved in golf? And just process that and what impact it had?
Yeah, it was mind-blowing. You know, Willie Park and Tom Morris are playing each other, and they're beating each other with 90, 93, 92, 89, you know. So Allan, he's 42 at the time, but playing the golf of his life, shot 79. And if I can just I'll read out a little, because two things overlap. The 79, where he is just shot this unbelievable score, and his early death. Sorry, bear with me a second.
You need your glasses as well.
No, not at all. I just, I don't want to read too much because people will fall asleep. So, okay. Sorry. Okay. I might jump about a bit, but in a clipping in his scrapbook, the detail of his finest hour in a match against Mr. Beaton of Blebo in the autumn meeting set out that a week or so later, after his matches with Tom, and the quote says, "A notable event in the annals of golfing, however, occurred on the 15th when Allan, the champion, in a match against Mr. Beaton of Blebo, holed the links in 79, which has never been done before and will not be likely to be done again." Another clipping said, "On Wednesday, a match of 36 holes of 2 rounds was played on our links between the famed Allan Robertson and Mr. Beaton. Allan giving 3/4 odds, that is 1 more for every 3 holes.
and each fourth hole. Allan holed the first round in 86 and the second round in 79, this being the fewest strokes that a round over our links has ever been played. This is a most extraordinary short number to hole a round on StAndrews links, and Allan has the honour to be the first and most probably be the only one to accomplish that feat. Allan was not slowing down. In fact, the opposite. He was playing the best golf of his life, birdieing the last hole for a 79. Knowing the best golf in the world was playing so well, it made what happened next so very tragic. The spring meeting came in 1859, but there was no sign of Allan playing his typical list of matches with gentlemen and professionals. In a report for the Grand National Tournament in the Perthshire Journal on the 4th of August, it lamented, "A few professionals were on the links, Tom Morris, Park, Dunn, Bob Andrews, but there's been no matches as yet of consequence. Allan, we are sorry to say, has been very ill for some time and is far from being able to appear on the turf." Allan would have been able to hear the comings and goings of the golfers and visitors. His golf parlour may have been open for business with Lang Willie and Da Anderson holding fort. The Caledonian Mercury of 7 September reported, "Some months ago he was attacked by jaundice, which refused to yield to medical treatment. Many were the inquiries made after his health by visitors of the links." Another reported, "At the time of the golf tournament he was able to appear on the green, and gladly his presence was hailed by some gentlemen at the gathering. After the tournament he was able to go out a little, but latterly his disease assumed an alarming aspect. For several weeks back it is observed he was gradually sinking." It is beyond reasonable doubt Tom would have called in to see his lifelong close friend. Allan would have known that the disease had beaten him. Jaundice is noticeable by the yellowing of the skin and in the whites of the eyes. Modern day medicines target the cause of jaundice rather than the symptoms themselves. In the 21st century, recovery is commonplace, but not so in the mid-19th century. However, the pointed phrasing of jaundice attack, according to retired surgeon and golf historian David Hamilton, points us towards viral hepatitis A, which is still more dangerous today. Less likely is a pancreas tumour, which would come on slowly. Alas, this was one battle where Allan couldn't snot at them at the burn. That was a phrase Allan used. It is tempting to think about Allan and Tom's final moments together with Allan bedridden. In a movie, he would ask Tom to be the new champion and to go out and beat Tom, whoever Tom was lined up to play, with few tips about their opponent's Achilles heel. Sadly, this is fanciful. Tom never spoke of their final minutes, and with Allan publicly appearing at the Grand National, Tom may have even believed or hoped Allan was on the mend. He couldn't be bunkered, not Allan type thinking. Allan died in his home, according to the death record, on 1st of September 1859 at 1:20 p.m, age 43. It is remarkable to think that Tom Morris was only 38 at the time and would live for another 49 years.
Thank you very much, Roger. That's really beautifully written and beautifully put. I think you've hinted at a film. I think that's what we need next, but not a fanciful one.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%.
What was the response to Allan's death after that? We see in the club a huge outpouring of support for Allan's widow and money provided for her for the rest of her life, really, which is quite incredible. But his friends, his colleagues...
Yeah, I think they were shocked, you know. This is the king. He was called the king of clubs, you know. And I think just utter shock that the greatest has gone, and so young, you know, and arguably at absolutely the peak of his powers, you know. So yeah, the funeral was described in all the papers as the length of South Street. It was a mixture of lords and golfers and caddies and people who they thought of him as one of their own, really. So it was a huge funeral, and but it did leave that question: who's the new champion golfer? Mm-hmm. And that's why Prestwick created the Open Championship. Mm-hmm. So, and then Tom Morris, designs the Prestwick links, or redesigns the Prestwick links, I should say, and goes on to win 4 times, and then his son win 4 times, and then Tom's still the oldest winner of the Open and still has the largest margin of victory. But then Tom goes on and creates 100 golf courses and becomes the grand old man of golf. And people say, why did we forget about Allan? And it's just that, as the game's exploding, people are worshipping Tom Morris, mm-hmm. And rightly so, and Tommy Morris, mm-hmm. Amazing story,
Yeah, but we've put that right with this book and highlighting his huge contribution. What do you see as Allan's lasting legacy for StAndrews, for golf?
Do in 1848, he created what he called the frying pan. And that's the sort of lob wedge that we play today. That still resonates, that he came
mm-hmm.
up with that idea. I think that's probably, he's still relevant, in that sense. Because when he played, they were playing a low running game where they're running the ball up to the green, mm-hmm. And he was able to go over the bunker mm-hmm. rather than around it. Mm-hmm. So I think it's amazing. And then I can't tell you how happy I am. I couldn't be happier if he was given the award to me. Jack Nicklaus is basically honouring Allan Robertson next year at the memorial tournament, at his course. And I'm just so overjoyed about that, because suddenly there's a book, there's a plaque, and now the greatest of all time, arguably, is honouring him. Mm-hmm. What a perfect scenario. That's
lovely, a perfect way to honour him. I just want to thank you very much for taking part in this conversation. As ever, your passion for the subject comes through in every page. It's a huge amount of work, and I admire you so much all the time anyway, Roger. But thank you so much for giving us an insight alongside Bill Williams' initial research, Chick's great work, and all the support that the community provides you and as well. But we just want to thank you this evening for bringing us the book. We do have copies of the book for sale, and Peter has copies at the front. So if anyone doesn't have your copy now, I hope that's whetted your appetite and you're all champing at the bit to get a copy. But I just want to thank you very much, Roger, for a wonderful evening. Thank you.
You're very welcome.